So in this session, this is all about knowing your numbers, and what we really want you guys to walk away with is the ability that knowing your numbers gives you to be able to make really informed decisions about your businesses moving forward. And I think what's really important is, because you all have a social enterprise lens or arm to your business, sometimes we can get a bit confused and that line can get blurred around what's not for profit, what's profit, all of that. So you've got that additional layer of complexity that a standard just for-profit business wouldn't have. We're going to run you through the power of forecasting and understanding what does looking forward do in terms of enabling the decisions and your planning and all of that sort of stuff. Help you create a 12-month cash flow for your business. So that's a really solid outcome that we hope is really, tactical and just helps you really take flight off the back of it. And then we've got a couple of tips around being more profitable in your business. Let's start with talking about your money mindset. Now, this is something that there's whole businesses built around money mindset. So you could go down the rabbit warren and go and explore it. Suffice to say that for this, we just want you to have a level of awareness that we all have a foundational baseline around our natural inclination when it comes to money and our money personality. And some of us sit at the scarcity end of the spectrum and others sit at the abundance end of the spectrum. And there's no right or wrong. This is definitely one you can blame your parents for, because it's largely based on the things we heard and the things we experienced around money growing up. But the good news is that now we've grown up, we can take it on ourselves to be conscious of it and to take steps, because by having more of an abundance mindset, it will help you trust and make really strong decisions with your business. If you're too scared with your scarcity mindset, you'll be too scared to take action. So your scarcity mindset would play out a little bit if you think like how Eeyore is and Winnie the Pooh. This is very, woe is me, I'll never have enough money, I'm not smart enough to handle money, I don't want any help, like I'm scared to look at my bank account, I'm always going to be poor, business is always going to be hard. So that's what it sounds like when you're at that end. The other end is you sound like Pollyanna and you're like, oh, it's fabulous, I've got more than enough money, I'm always finding new ideas, I always get the help that I need, I can learn everything I want, I'm the hero of my story. So that's kind of the thinking that underlines that. And so we all have a natural tendency with where we sit, and then you can do, by having the awareness, you can work on it so that you can sit hopefully more at that upper end in terms of slightly more abundant, because that's going to help you trust and have more confidence of putting yourself forward in your business. I'm just going to ask you some questions. So in terms of how your money mindset plays out practically, if you're looking at question number 1, I check that my business is financially on track. A is I rarely or never check. B is I just check my bank balance every now and then. C, my accountant does that for me. And D, yes, I check regularly. The B for this one is the one that we see playing out most often. Okay, number 2 is how much does it cost to run your beautiful business? So your baseline cost, your rent, your cost of materials. So A is no, I don't really think about it. B, the thought of it scares me. C, yes, once or twice a year. And D, I check at least monthly. Calculating gross profit margin to see if you're earning enough to cover costs, make some money, and for you guys from a social enterprise perspective, pay that forward and out. I'm going to start back again at A, what is a gross profit margin? Or B, I have no idea what my gross profit margin is. C, maybe my accountant does it. And D, yes, I do. Final question, my business planning includes key numbers, e.g. revenue and net profit. A, I have no idea what you're talking about. B, I don't do business planning. C, I make an educated guess. And D, I use a forecasting tool. So good news is there's no great surprises. You're pretty common, hey Robyn, with what we see in the groups that we run the session with and who we work with.
It is very common, and that's probably why we do run these sessions, because they're absolutely irrelevant of money mindsets. It just seems to be that there is a great range of how much people look at the finances of their business. But what I find with working with clients is that a lot of people don't look at their finances, or they don't know their numbers, because they think it's too hard. So because they think it's too hard, they tend to ignore it. We do that head in the sand. So I just wanted to, before we head into some more of the details, is just give you a bit of an example of a business owner that I've worked with. We'll call him Barry the business owner. Now, Barry had been in business for probably around about 5 years. And it was still a small business, but he did have about 3 staff. So that is a significant business with people relying on that business. And he was in a business that had great fluctuations in sales, so the money coming in. And he would get bookings for jobs, but those jobs may not have been for 6 months' time. And he had no idea of what was going on with his business. He left most of it over to his accountant to do. So his accountant would just let him know if he had any tax that needed to pay, what bills were needing to pay. He didn't even really know what staff were being paid. The accountant would just let him know, here you go, you need to make this payment this month. So he was really in this precarious position, but once again, because he was too scared or didn't think he was capable of doing it himself, he hadn't really looked at it. And it was only when COVID hit and all of a sudden he knew that he was going to be losing work, that he thought, oh my goodness, I need to have a closer look at this because I have no idea what is going on. So he contacted his accountant, and accountants are wonderful people, but accountants tend to look in the past. They are historical thinkers. So they will tell you what you've been doing and what you could have done better or what you should have done better. They're all about should, but they don't really tell you how to plan for what is about to happen and things that you may not be expecting to happen, like a pandemic, for example. So anyway, Barry came to me and we sat down, we had a look at his finances, and simply by showing him a few reports that he could get from Xero so he could keep track of his numbers, it was absolutely life-changing for him. So he had spent years not sure whether he was able to take any money from his business, not sure whether he should be rejoicing or vomiting from fear, because he just didn't know about his numbers. So that's just an example of how important this information is. Now, we're not going to get into it at the level of an accountant. I mean, they've done 4 years of study on this stuff. They should know what they're doing. Also, we're not going to get at the level of large business. What we're going to do is give it to you at a level where somebody that's running a small business has enough information to know what's going on with their business. You still need an accountant to be telling you how to do your taxes and how to take the most advantage of your depreciation and things like that. We're not going to get into that at all. That's by the by. What you need to be making sure of is that your business is sustaining itself, and part of sustaining itself is also making some profit. You need some profit to be sustainable. So profit is not a dirty word. So that's just my preface to what we're going to get into now.
So there you go. Talk us through them.
Talk us through them. So these are just a list of terms that you probably already know, you've probably already heard, and they are the very, very, very basics of business. So what we start with is your revenue or your sales or your income. So those words are used interchangeably, but what we're talking about is the money that is coming into your business. And that could be from sales to customers, it could be your subscriptions, it could be your funding streams, but your revenue, your sales or your income, same words, are basically talking about the money that comes into your business. So that's the first part. Maybe I find it the most interesting part, but That's your revenue, sales, or income. Then we talk about cash flow. So when we're talking about cash flow, we're talking about the money that's coming into your business and the money that's going out of your business. And this is as it actually hits your bank account. Or if you've got a little drawer you put money in. No, it's actually when that money hits your bank account. So we're not talking about the money that you've invoiced but not received, or money that you're hoping to get in a few weeks' time, or somebody books a job and then you're not going to get paid for six weeks. So we're talking about the money as it comes into your bank account at the time, and the money that goes out of your bank account at the time. Another term that is sometimes used is budget or forecast. So budget tends to be a word that is used by accountants or in the corporate world, or by Xero. So when we're talking about budgets, it's kind of more of a restrictive, it is very much, let's just say it's not aspirational. It's often based on what's happened already. So you might have a budget for next year, and that it will be based on your sales from the previous year plus a percentage. So it doesn't take into account anything that's going on in your life and everybody else's lives in the economy or anything else. It is just a very trite amount of money. And normally a budget is put in place so that one, you can restrict your spending. So they go, you've got an amount of money there, it doesn't matter what's happening, I'm only going to spend that much money on my power that year, or on my marketing that next year. It tends to be the budgets are set for you by someone else, whereas your forecast is for you, the business owner, or for you, somebody that has some control of what's going on in the business, to say, this is what I'm wanting to happen. So it's more aspirational, and it's more, I'm pretty sure I know what's going to be happening in the next 6 months. So that is what I'm going to forecast is happening. Whereas if you're going to get a budget out of Xero, for example, you are getting a computer that's telling you that based on something, normally what happened last year, I'm going to put a percentage on it, and that's what's going to happen again. So there's no thought to it. There's no aspiration. There's no goal setting involved. So we like to talk about forecasting rather than budgets. Now, your profit and loss statement, that is an accounting report, and it shows your income and the money going out of your business, but it doesn't include things like, it doesn't include your drawings, it doesn't include tax, it doesn't include depreciation, all those other things. So that is just a report of the money coming in and the money coming out of your business. So there are things there that when you're running a business, you're going to be forecasting for that don't appear in your profit and loss statement. But if you're looking for something to help you with your forecasting from Xero, it's your profit and loss report that you can use for that. So your gross margin, and we hear this term a lot. So your gross margin is the money that's left over after you take out the cost of producing the goods or service. So your gross margin for a bicycle, for example, is you sell your bicycle for $250. It has cost you $100 to produce that bicycle, so your gross margin is $150. So you don't take out from that the actual cost of running your business, the rent, the marketing, anything else. It is just purely, what have I got left over after I have produced that bike from when I sell it? So then we get to the net margins. That takes out not just the cost of producing whatever you're selling, but also the cost of running your business. So your overheads, And they are things such as your rent, your marketing, your insurance, your any interest expenses, your bank fees. Where this sometimes does get confusing is labor costs, for example. There will be some people in your business that you are only using because the amount you are selling. So they would then sit up in your gross margin. So for example, who was our bike shop person? Andy. So so Andy may have people come in to do some servicing on bikes, depending on how much servicing is required on bikes. So the cost of those people goes up in your what we call your top line. So it comes off to your gross margin. Whereas Andy may have somebody that works in the office and they're going to be working in there, whether he's servicing 2 bikes or 20 bikes. So that person is an overhead because they are there no matter what is happening as far as your sales go. And then the word that is the controversial word, profit. So profit is what is left over from all the money coming in, and you take all the money out, and what's left over is your profit. And you do need to be making a profit for your business to be sustainable. For a lot of businesses, it might be your profit that is paying the business owner. For a lot of business, it's your profit that allows you to grow your business. For some,
and for you guys, in terms of for the focus from a social enterprise model perspective, profit's the thing that enables you to unlock the good that you're, you know, paying forward and out into the world. So you need the profit in order to, you know, however your model is, to make the donations or to have the contras or to have the pay it forward items and things like that. So yeah,
exactly. And but also remembering it is your profit that you pay tax from. So that's where your accountant will start juggling with your profit so that you don't pay as much tax. But for these purposes, where we're just going to pretend it's a tax-free world, and we're not going to worry about that at all. Suffice to say, you do need to be making a profit so that you can do more of what you're doing so well. Probably other terms that you've heard bandied around is a lot of people talk about their balance sheet, what's showing on their balance sheet, etc. Once again, they're very accounting terms. What's showing on your balance sheet doesn't necessarily reflect what's actually happening in your business. So I don't get too hung up on balance sheets or shareholders' equity or any of that sort of stuff. We're just talking about information that really helps you running your business. So cash flow forecasting, we may have alluded to the fact that this is a passion of mine, is the cash flow forecasting, because of the knowledge that it unlocks. I don't do much at all without doing cash flow forecasting first. Applies to a lot of my life, even the personal stuff. Something when I'll go, I'm going to cash flow forecast that. So it's a wonderful tool for running your business. The other thing is, when you do have a really good cash flow forecasting tool, it does all those calculations that you need on your gross margin and your net margin, etc. So for those that hate a calculator, this cash flow forecasting tool does it all for you. So that is really helpful as well. I can't work out a gross margin to save myself without an Excel spreadsheet to tell me what it is. So cash flow forecasting, what is it and why should you do it? Now, cash flow forecasting on its own, sitting there, you've done it. It does give you some indication to your business, but unless you're reviewing it regularly, it is really not so much use. So when I'm talking about the wonderful power of cash flow forecasting, I'm not talking about creating it and leaving it. I'm talking about creating it and reviewing it on a regular basis. And it becomes addictive, believe me. So cash flow forecasting is it's looking, so what it is first. So it's looking into the future with your numbers. And that is the numbers of the money coming in and the money coming out. Now, because we are talking about the future and none of us has a crystal ball, it is not accurate. And, you know, it's an estimate, but as we have found, a best guess is better than no guess at all. So don't get too hung up on, and I've seen a lot of people doing it, they don't cash flow forecast because they go, how do I know how much money I'm going to be making in the future? How do I know how many widgets I'm going to sell? How do I know how many people are going to sign up for my workshops, etc.? And so because they feel that it is so nebulous, they just don't do it at all. So what my advice is, don't worry too much about its accuracy. It's more that you're getting something down on paper. The other thing with the future is it's easier for me to predict what's happening in 6 weeks' time than it is for me to predict what's happening in a year's time, 5 years' time. So when you're doing a cash flow forecast, it's going to be easier to do a couple of months out than a year out. Put it in anyway, doesn't have to be accurate. As you're getting closer to that time, you're going to change it, you're going to review it. So don't get hung up on the exact amounts.
This is one of those situations where done to start with is certainly better than perfect. And this is where by building in the power to review what you forecast, your accuracy will increase. So do it to start with, test and learn and refine, rather than don't start because you're in analysis paralysis.
Yes, exactly. That sums that up. So once you have created your cash flow forecast, and it doesn't matter how accurate, it does help you stay on track to reaching your goals. So as you go back and you review it, and you believe that you were in September going to reach $10,000, but you see that you're not getting there, it tells you in your heart that there needs to be something you need to be doing differently so you can reach that goal. So it enables you to stay on track to reaching your goals, and it motivates you to take the action that you need to reach that goal. It also enables you to quickly make the changes you need to make if you're going off track. So if you do a forecast and you see that you're just not getting there at all, it enables you to quickly think about, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? Do I need to run more workshops? Do I need to put my price up? Do I need to not spend on that thing that I thought that I would like? So it enables you to quite quickly take some action before your wheels fall off completely. And that sounded very negative.
Well, what I would say is what's the power here is, rather than waiting for the accountant to tell you in a year, this is your way of being like, oh, I'll make a little tweak here so that the ship can head in the right direction, versus like, oh, like I've had a year and now I'm in the North Island rather than the South Island, right? So this is the whole, like, if I'm thinking, so let's say, for example, with the structured literacy program, like if you make this presumption around how many workshops you'll create and how many people are going to sign up, and then all of a sudden you're not seeing revenue when you come to sit down to do your review in a month, you're going to be like, okay, which of these presumptions that I made in my cash flow forecasting are inaccurate? And you can make an informed decision more rapidly and more quickly in the moment, so that you can take quick action, rather than in 6 months kind of feeling like, oh, it's not working, but I can't work out why, because so much water's come under the bridge. And so now there's like 7 different variables versus the 2 that there would have been if you'd done it in the same month.
Exactly.
And so that's where, back to the preface of the point, which is cash flow forecasting is awesome, but you've got to bring into your operating rhythm how you structure running your business to be building in the review.
Very much so. The other thing that is absolutely wonderful about cash flow forecasting is you can check out your new ideas or opportunities that come up before you dive straight into them. Now, I don't know if a lot of you have found, and the fact that you're in business or you're doing the business thing means that you've got a brain that's built that way, and you probably seek out opportunities. But when your brain's wired a bit far that way, and maybe, you know, a mindset of abundance, etc., you can have all these wonderful ideas that you can dive straight into without checking them out, only to find that actually they looked a lot shinier than they actually are. So it enables you to have a number of cash flow forecasts on, you know, on the go. Once you're working one, that this is how things are at the moment, and then I will do another forecast and go, if I pursue that opportunity, what's this going to do to my cash flow? Because it may derail it completely. It may absolutely make it, you know, wonderful, therefore go for it. But it gives you an opportunity to check out ideas before diving in. We've already talked about taking action on the things you need to do. So it can be quite practical in the sense of you can quite easily see the amount of action you need to take to reach what you're forecasting. As in, I need to sell 5 more bicycles, or I need to run 4 more workshops. So it's very practically minded to meeting actions with aspiration.
So for those of you that are dependent on other people, so once again, Pascal and Kirsten, I'm kind of thinking about you, is it makes it really easy to sort of bring to life what needs to happen. And so if you future cast yourselves in your business, you might be in startup mode now, but potentially you've got a team in 2 years' time. This is the thing that helps you translate it into small tactical steps. So you can go, we need to do X in order to do Y. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I heard in the introduction somebody talking about that they've got a business that they're thinking of bringing the manufacturing local, for example. I mean, that's the perfect thing to do with your cash flow forecast, is to forecast out what does it look like if I do that. So it gives you an opportunity to see what is required. And the last one that we've got there is that it's a magical, unexplainable power that it has, so that you can smash your goals. Now that sounds very woo-woo, and I'm the least woo-woo person you can imagine. But what I have found with working with a number of people and putting cash flow forecasts in place is that without doing anything else to their business, without changing anything else, without having $1 in marketing spend, for some reason their sales go up. And I totally believe it is because you put a goal in front of somebody and they just simply do what is required to reach that goal. So that's where it has its magical power, is in people's competitive nature, and that they love a goal, and once you put a goal in front of them, that's it, they're going to reach it. So I'm going to drive this and put some numbers in, but I sometimes get a little bit complicated in my thinking. So that is where Alana will step in and simplify what I'm saying if I get too complex, because we've, you know, busily talk about this numbers thing is easy, and then sometimes I get more complicating over it. So if when you open your spreadsheet, you go to the first tab, it's called revenue projection. So on this sheet, we're purely going to be looking at the money coming into the business. We're not going to worry about the money going out just yet. We're going to forecast what money's coming in, and then we'll add the money coming out shortly. So this spreadsheet is pretty much locked up. There's not a lot you can do with, you know, mucking around with any formulas or whatever, so you can play around with it as much as you like. Easiest place to start is putting your company name up on the top there. So that's one of the easiest ones, and what year you're projecting out. The dates you can change, but the dates need to be changed on this spreadsheet because it goes through to the other tabs. You can change the dates there. So when you're looking at sales, because every business is different, sometimes it's easiest just to go, okay, for that month, I'm going to have this much revenue come into my business. So that's thinking about it from a sales basis.
This might work really well if you have averages. So if you guys have average number of, memberships or something like that, and or you've got existing membership base and you want to put that in as a placeholder, or we had someone's doing some market sales, you might have, like you get $200 per market and you just average that through. Or I know we've got someone with an e-com business, so depending on how complex your product line is, you might just want to do a placeholder of I get $2,000 a month in e-com sales rather than itemizing out each product that you sell. And now Robyn will show you how it works if you want to itemize them out.
So if you have more of a product-based business or a service-based business where you've got kind of a few services that you do, you can work out your revenue based on how many of those widgets you're going to sell or how many of those services you're going to be providing month to month. Now, so if we use as an example, and I just find one of the easiest examples from a product-based business is the bicycle. So you put in there what your product is. Now, of course, you're going to have more than one sort of bicycle. You're probably going to have a number of bicycles. So for your product and service, for example, you might have to group them into these are our lower cost bicycles, these are our medium cost bicycles, and these are our higher cost bicycles.
From a servicing perspective, you might know that you have an average service and there's like a small, medium, and really hefty average service. So you'd put in like a $50, $100, and $150 in terms of an average service to give you a ballpark rather than having to get really granular.
For the more complicated business, it is far easier to just predict your sales for the month. And I think that's really what's important to look at with this tool. It is not an accounting tool. So you're not going to go to an accountant with this. This is purely for your planning, etc. So whatever way works for you is the best way to do it. But I have found with more complex businesses, just to have a set amount of this is the amount of money we need to come into the business. We need or we want to come into the business on a month-to-month basis. And it's sometimes, and I've had it with a lot of business, it's a figure plucked out of the air, more or less. It's just a really aspirational, especially when you're starting out in business. Once you've been going in business for a little while, you can go, well, last year we did do 10,000 that month. I can't see that things have changed a lot, but I'm definitely growing. So I'm going to predict that we're going to do 15,000 this year. So that makes it easier for those businesses that have been going for a while because you've got a little bit of data to work with or a little bit of information to work with. But if you are going to want to base it on cost, you simply down in this area, you put what your product is and what the cost is to your customer. So we'll say it's a bicycle for $250. But as well as selling a bicycle, for example, you may decide that you're going to carry out, you might decide that you're going to carry out workshops to teach people how to keep themselves safe while they're on their bicycles. And you're going to charge $120 per person for them to attend that workshop. And in September, you're planning on getting 12 people along to your workshop. And then you're going to hold that workshop again in March, and there's going to be another 12 people. As far as your bicycle sales go, you're only starting out and you're going to sell 2 in the first month. and you're going to increase that by October. Things are going to be going really well, and November, December, Christmas rushes on. Everybody's going to be wanting to buy one, so you actually going to sell 25 there. January, quite a month, going to drop down to 20. February, everybody's done their Christmas buying. Not many bicycles going to be sold then. And I mean, you get the idea there that you can adjust those figures based on seasonal stuff going on, or that you know that you may not be working so much that month. So I've just done that to give an example of how to put in your revenue. The way you do it is going to be whatever suits your business, or suits your way of thinking, or suits how you actually work it out. I think we're getting back to the fact that done is better than perfect at this stage, and it is only giving you a guideline. And what I would be doing is that, and when I get to the end of September, so I've done a couple of months, I'd probably be adjusting these, because some reality kicks in and you think, oh, I was actually being too aspirational.
Would you be putting in things like grants and funding things into this revenue projection table, or is that a separate piece?
If it's a core part of how you get your revenue in terms of funding, yes. And what you might want to do is feel free to reach out to Robyn if you would like maybe a couple of the rows above sales unlocked. So maybe you put in a headline row for grants, if it doesn't make sense to put them down as product or service lines. So that might be applicable for some of you if you do have grant income streams, is that you actually go, I know that I get, I don't know, say you might get 4 drops through the year. You want to know when that's going to actually hit your bank account, and putting that in is really important, Robyn?
It is really important, and it also depends whether, this is where I get more complicated, whether it's subject to GST or not from the grants you get. So if it is subject to GST, it really needs to go in this income line. I have got another income line on another tab for money coming into your business that's not subject to GST. But I find the easiest way to think about GST, if you are GST registered, is that you are purely a vehicle, you are a holder of money for the inland revenue. So when your customer purchases off you, the GST part that they pay is actually belongs to the IRD, and you're going to hold that until the end of the period where you're going to then pay it to inland revenue. But when you purchase something, so you will purchase a $50 pedal for the bike, and $10 of that is GST, you're going to claim that back at the same time. So you are a holder of money for the inland revenue, basically. So whenever I'm doing figures, I leave GST out, because it is just money that's coming in and going out. But in saying that, this forecast actually does calculate your GST as well.
That's where we see it impacting often from a, yes, you're the holder, but if you're not allowing for it from a cash flow perspective, this is where when you then all of a sudden get the bill to say you owe GST, you go, crumbs, now we've not got money to pay for these things next month. And so that's why it's so important to be looking at this all the time, so that you don't get those big surprises as it actually hits your bank account, because that's what we feel the most in business, right? Doesn't matter what our year-end accounts say, what does our bank account say? And let's go with that, because that's the one that we feel day to day, right?
There is a place here for doing reviews, but I'm going to get back to that after we've gone through and completed our cash flow forecast. I'll show you how to review it. And just for those that are GST registered, or that basically GST registered, yes. These figures I put in here are without GST. So the GST exclusive price is what goes into this forecast. Right, now this is where it's starting to look a lot more complicated, and I've put a lot of the figures in here already, just based on the example. So up the top line is the revenue that you've already put in. So this is at line 8 under gross sales. So the revenue you put in the other spreadsheet automatically flicks through to here. And it shows that based on that sales line, plus the couple of bike sales, plus the couple of workshops I was doing, that is my gross sales for the month. Now then you come down to money going out. And we start with the money that is going out that relates directly to your sales. So in this example, I've used contractors. So that would be people that are coming in to do some work based on your sales. So it's not your staff so much, it is the contractors that are coming in. I've also got materials there, and also because we had some workshops, there's the cost of the room hire, just used as an example. So you can actually change those lines to whatever you want them to be. But make sure you use those lines for things that are related to producing your product or your service.
I was just going to say, for example, if we're thinking about the Rid is running the company where you might bring your manufacturing onshore, if there's part of that doesn't involve you having regular overheads, and say, for example, you're just using a premises for short-term hire to create a batch of your oils, that would be factored into your cost of goods sold. Or those of you running your programs, if, for example, you have, I don't know if it's like, say, a particular program where you have to have a staff member on site just for that program, you'd factor that in up here, if that makes sense. Or Tara, let's fast forward a couple of years and you're going to get a videographer to accompany you on a photo shoot. You bundled them up there because they'd almost fit as a subcontractor.
So doing the cost of goods sold is probably the lines that takes the most thought, is that you're going to need to be working out. So if I am predicting that I am going to sell 50 widgets, what is going to be the cost of my materials to produce that? And because we're talking about cash flow, and we're wanting to know what money is in the bank, this is to reflect when the money leaves your bank account. So somebody might say that is making the bicycles before they sell it, for example. They are not going to purchase a pedal at the same time as they sell the bike. They are going to purchase pedals a couple of times a year because they're better to buy them in bulk rather than buy one pedal. So the business owner will go, I'm going to do some purchasing in a particular month. And
so I'm just thinking the person doing t-shirt sales at the markets, you're pre-purchasing your stock, pre-printing your stock, and then you're selling them at another time period. So you want to be putting in here the time that the cost hits your bank account versus the market sale.
Has that confused a few people? So this money is when I'm going to buy something, basically, not particularly the percentage of the sale. So then if you look at the gross profit percentage, it's calculated it for you. So what is your gross profit? So your gross profit in dollars, for example, in August is $3,500, which is a 54% margin. So when I'm doing forecasting, I like that gross profit percentage margin to sit between 50 to 60%. Now, if you are purely a kind of a one-man band, and you might have very low cost of producing what you do. So that might be, particularly in a service-based business, it may be coaching, for example. We'll use that as an example, is that there's not much cost of your goods, so your gross profit percentage will be very high. But for any businesses, if you're starting to get below 50%, then you don't have much margin for error, or you don't have much room for things not to go well. So we talk about
the other
50%.
the other thing that we sort of talk about here is that it might feel really greedy in startup phase when your overheads are really low to want a high gross profit margin, but the higher the margin means the more future-proof you are, and you won't get what we often see, which is growing pains, which is all of a sudden you've got these new overhead lines that your gross profit margin didn't allow for 2 years ago, and so all of a sudden you're wondering why you're not got so much profit landing in your bank account. And so that's why, hey, Robyn, that's a big driver of wanting that number to be as high as possible, because what it means is as your overheads stack up in these next expense lines on your cash flow, your net profit margin doesn't shrink as dramatically.
So when you play around with the numbers, you'll start to see what happens. And even if you look at this example I have used, in August, for example, we've got a 54% gross profit percentage. So you think, oh, that's really, really good. But then when you come down to row 40, which shows the net profit, you've actually lost nearly $2,000, because that margin wasn't high enough for our overheads at that time. And it wasn't high enough because our sales weren't high enough. So once we level out and the business starts to grow a bit more and our sales get higher, our percentage of the overheads is lower. So you can look at your margin when you first start out, and yeah, it's 50 or 60%, which is really good, but you've got these certain overheads that don't change even though you're small, and so your sales aren't very much, and so you find you're actually losing money. And what is wonderful about this tool is at least it tells you, because if you're not keeping an eye on these numbers, you know, just you've missed the boat by 2,000 in a month, and not saying that you don't notice it, but if you don't know it's happening, or you're not predicting it's happening, then that's when you can get into trouble. And even if we look at September, our sales weren't much higher, but our gross margin is 61%. And that means then we actually did make a profit that month of 8%, because we got that margin up a little bit higher. And then if you look at February, for example, because we had that drop down in sales, we still were paying out for a room hire. What else did I have in there? There must have been another cost in February that was high, and all of a sudden we've lost, I can't read it, $2,300 on that month. So it enables you to predict what's happening.
Yeah, and I think where you see this is, or you see the power of this, is it helps those of you with really large seasonal fluctuations to either your income or your outgoings have some predictability that then helps you manage what's coming in and out of your bank account in terms of drawings, or hey, we've got to be a bit more conservative with this. And for anyone, say for example, if you've got a purchase because I don't know, the trade fairs are in August, but your big sales don't kick off until February, this helps you make those informed decisions about, I'm going to need to inject this much of my own funding, or I can't take drawings this month.
Exactly. Now we get to the more aspirational part of it. So if you go right to the right-hand side of the spreadsheet in row Q, okay, so that gives us a total of what we predict is going to happen for the year. And then if you go to R, this is where it gets exciting. It shows what's going to happen in the future. And you're able to change so I'm going to do, we'll make it 10%. I'm going to do 10% more in sales in my second year. And that's not a big step up. So that's a quite doable step up. And for a lot of businesses starting out, it isn't in that first 2 years that you get a big growth in sales. So it can be as much as 40%, 50%. But if you just go, I just want to see what it looks like just to make an extra 10% in my second year, it gives you the figures for that. And you go, as well as increasing my my sales by 10%, I'm going to actually do more. I'm going to be able to find some materials for less. So I'm going to bring my cost of sales down only a little bit, 8%. I'm only going to increase it by 8%. These are increases actually. And room hire might only be 5%. So you can actually change those percentages year on year over 5 years, just to kind of see what small changes you can make to your finances that are going to make a big difference to your profits. So we can see, based on that in 2025, 2026, that's an $81,000 profit. Now, that's not going to be profit. Probably you're going to fire that back into the business, or you're going to fire that back to the community, or you're going to do something else with that money. But it's nice to see there that your business is profitable and that it is making money, which makes it sustainable. So this last tab is where all the doing happens. So there's hardly anything you need to input into here because it is all transferring across, but it's showing what is happening to your bank account. This is where, for any of you that do have other funding streams that may not be subject to GST, or that you get donations, or there's some other way that money's coming into the business, you put it in here at line 8. Unfortunately, what this line is sometimes used is when the business owner themselves needs to put more money into the business. But at least,
which is also very, very standard and natural when you're in startup mode.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
disclaimer, at a point of maturity, you would hope that you're not having to do big injections because you're using this to make informed decisions about your cash flow. But equally, when you're in startup mode, this stuff happens a whole lot more. So don't beat yourself up if you're in that phase, because we've all been there. It's part of the journey.
And under debt servicing is where, if you do decide that that you need to lease a vehicle for your business, or you've got you might decide to lease some equipment, that goes into these lines, and you can change the name of those, but that is for all your debt servicing, for example. And then under capital and other expenses, this is where I normally put any IRD payments that need to be made, or ACC payments, and you've got a line there for your director's drawings if you are going to be drawing some money out of the business.
I was just going to say, Robyn, does everyone understand how to use, back up to the expenses line? In line 33, can everyone make does everyone feel confident in how you would use that GST payment line in terms of how it's impacting your cash flow? Just because I know there were some questions earlier on in the session about the nature of pesky old GST. Robyn, do you maybe want to talk about that, just so that people can understand how that's going to flow, because that's a lumpy one, GST, huh?
It is a lumpy one, and with this cash flow forecast, in earlier iterations of the cash flow forecast, had an extremely complicated formula that would actually work out ballpark figure of how much GST that would be going in or out. But it was very complicated because GST is something that some people pay 6 monthly, some people pay 2 monthly. It also got very complicated because GST, of course, is paid on the month following of whatever period that you've got, except for in sometimes of the year when they flick it even further out because they think they're being kind to you by giving you longer to pay it. I think it's the Christmas payment, for example, doesn't have to be paid till February. So anyway, that got way too complicated. So what I have done is left the line here so you can actually input that number yourself. And you can either do it on a predictive nature by going, because based on I've been going in business for a while, I know that, you know, with that amount of sales, I pay around about that much GST. Because every business is so different with the amount they have to pay compared with how much they claim. And also some not-for-profits aren't subject to GST for certain things, etc. So because it got complicated, I left that, but you can fill it out if you you can either fill it out after the fact, so it keeps your cash flow on track, or if you want to have a go at predicting it, then you can. And if you are getting a receipt, it is a negative number. So if I'm expecting a refund of $500 of GST for that month, I will put not $500, I will put minus $500. In a lot of ways, GST is a really good system of taxing a business, because with your money coming in and your money going out, you're actually only paying GST if the money coming in is more than the money going out. So if the money going out is more than the money coming in other words, you're losing money, you're going to get a GST refund. So,
which is not to encourage you to spend more than you earn. Because sometimes that's what we see as clients are like, darn, I've got a GST bill. We're like, yay, that means you made money. So that's an important thing to grapple with from a money mindset perspective too.
So I've also put in here, so this is where you would put in if you're taking drawings from the business. Another way I use this area, as you can see, so you know, in October I might go, unfortunately I'm going to put $5,000 of my own money in. I make sure that somewhere down here I record that I am actually going to, so it's under the capital line, I'm actually going to pay myself back that $5,000. So I can put that movement of money in my cash flow forecast or predict for it, and it gives me some idea. So if we actually look at that, I'll just make it a tad bit smaller.
I was just going to say, while Robyn's driving that, this is why you've also got the lines on 47 and 48. From a social enterprise perspective, you can be factoring in any, large donations, depending on how you're working the structure of your particular business model. It just allows for that over here in this part of your cash flow forecast rather than in any of the earlier parts of the process.
So I'm just going to take that money that I put in, I'm just going to take that out just so I can show you this. The bottom lines 53.54. This is really what you're going to be wanting to look at. So if I'm doing this for a business, whether it be a startup or an existing business, what I'll do first is I'll predict all the money coming in and I'll predict all the money coming out. I would normally maybe not put in the director's drawings at this stage. Some people do the whole, no, really, it's important to pay yourself first if it's your business. I don't see how that works, because if you don't have the money, you can't pay yourself. Or if you've got other people that need paying before you, you do actually have to pay those bills before you can pay yourself. But anyway, that's a conversation for another time. So this is where I start. So I've got, what is my opening bank balance? What was my bank balance on the 1st of August? This would be, and I might just knock that down to 5,000. So I had $5,000 in the bank. And then we can see from this that things don't go so very well with that $5,000 in the bank. Actually, things don't go too well at all. But then I am doing director's drawings of 4,000. That's what's probably mucked that up. But I'm starting with 5,000, closing balance 844. Oh my goodness. I am actually, even in August, going to need to put another $10,000 into the bank. And that was really all that was required to keep me actually with a positive bank balance, was just that extra $10,000. But say maybe I only had 5, so I've put 5,000 in. Oh my goodness, I have got another problem in October where I'm going to run out of money. In October, I think I better only take $2,000 in drawings. Oh, that's still not enough. I might need to put another 2,000 of my own money in there.
Or you can go back to your revenue projections at the front end and go, I'll run another workshop. I'll attend another market. I'll aim for another venue hire. I'll open on a Saturday morning. And then that helps me see what that decision does to the bank balance. Because this is why cash flow is so important. It's literally the lifeblood of your business. This is the thing that keeps most people awake at 3 a.m. It's the thought of, what if something comes out and I go into negative? Cash flow is the lifeblood. It's the thing that stresses us out. And when it's going well, it's the thing that then enables you to work on the other stuff that helps you get out of in the business and work on the business.
And that's exactly right, because I can look at this and, say I don't put that extra 5,000 in and things are looking a little bit dire in the bank balance. I can play around with the numbers here and go, actually, I need to not do 8,000, I need to do 10,000 in September. That's what I'm going to work towards. That's what I need. And then I look at my cash flow forecast, and that wasn't quite enough.
Let's say you run another workshop in October, then chuck in another workshop.
I'm going to do another workshop of 12 people in October, and that still wasn't enough. So I'm going to push this up.
Do you guys start to see conceptually how you can make this work for scenario planning? So maybe you don't add in that new expense for another 3 months, or you defer or come up with a payment plan, or you change your mind on when you're going to take drawings or make that donation. Does it sort of make sense about how you'll practically bring it to life in terms of those strategic levers as you're back in workload?
When you start playing around with it, you can see what you can do and what it does to the numbers. And basically that's what it's all about, playing around with that. And then that shows you the actions you need to take.
So if we're going to talk about managing and improving your finances, then these are the things that then mean that the tool's going to work a whole lot better. So obviously a big part of that is creating a business model that works for you. This is what cash flow is kind of like the enabler. Or you come back to the drawing board and go, oh, it's not going to work from a cash flow perspective. Let's come back strategically. So that's a really big first step. If you want cash flow to work, the business model's got to work strategically. The second one is keeping track of your finances on an operational level. So this is really simple stuff that sometimes gets forgotten. Separate bank account for income and expenses. It keeps the accountant happy, but it also makes your life a whole lot easier. And when you're in baby startup phase, don't feel too bad if that's a separate bank account that's still in your name rather than in, a business name, because we see that happening. Understanding your trends in terms of looking at coming back up to that helicopter of your business. What are your seasonal impacts? What are the economic impacts for those of you factoring in things like, your school holiday impacts on your community hubs and things like that. I would imagine, I know that we have a few people in here, it looks like they might be dependent on, what is the New Zealand dollar doing and making decisions around that. So understanding those trends, setting aside money. And this comes back to that money mindset at the start, because sometimes we can feel so scared that we then don't want to spend the money on periodic payments, or we're being so Pollyanna, we're spending because it's in our bank account and we've forgotten that we've got that thing coming up in 3 months' time. So it just means you've got that lens from a periodic payment perspective. And then another thing that can be really helpful, back to earlier point, is asking if you can pay bills in installments. You'll be amazed the number of accountants that actually will be okay with monthly bills, because it keeps their cash flow rather than waiting for, year end. And what that means is you don't all of a sudden have a huge like $1,500 or $2,000 bill appear from nowhere. Point 3, for those of you with debtors, so it sounded like there's a few of you, this is less likely if you're in e-com, right? Like people buy money lands, ship product. For those of us in we have an invoice relationship with our customers, keeping on top of those invoices being paid is really, really critical, because you don't get paid, you can't spend the money. So need to be paid for the work you do. And this is where it's really a couple of things. One, we see money mindset play out in the not wanting to hit go on the invoice. So if you need permission, we're giving you permission. Someone said yes, you're allowed to invoice them. If they said yes to your service, most likely, rather than product, they said yes to your service, invoice them as soon as possible. Don't hold yourself back. Don't make that the last thing you do on your to-do list. Do it the first thing, as early as possible. Start your week with invoicing. Whatever you've got to do to be like, yes, I'm a real business, I'm making money. Ask for those down payments. You actually go, yes, absolutely, I can do this incredibly complicated, your bike has 700 wheels service. But that means I'm going to need to source some stuff that I wouldn't normally. And so therefore I ask for an upfront payment or, particular percentage of the deposit. It's increasingly common, and particularly post-COVID, I think customers are a lot more understanding of the reality of cash flow in small business. And so that's totally okay from a customer centricity lens. And the other thing that we'd say there is remember to chase when people owe you. So build in, it sounded like when we were at the start, sounded like most people are using Xero. You can set up your Xero to do the automatic reminders. So if you don't like being the annoying mosquito, you can get Xero to, after a week, go and remind. And the 20th of the month thing is still a thing in New Zealand. And I don't know if we're going to see that change in a hurry. There was some talk, I think it was last year, around big business, and there was going to be a mandate from the government around needing to pay small business 7 days. Robyn, have we heard anything kind of changing in that landscape? So yeah, there's still a psyche, and some big businesses are really, really not great at paying. And it's not even the 20th of the month. Some of them will just sit on it. And that does hurt. So hopefully this cash flow forecasting helps you with that, but you're allowed to chase and factor that in when you're then paying your bills as well. As if you know that you're not going to get paid the bulk of your stuff until the 20th, then try and do the same thing. And I think, Robyn, is there anything I've missed around point 3 there that you'd add?
No, it's just around getting that money in on time. So, if you are providing somebody an incentive by paying you up front, it's really good, because this is one of the most difficult things in cash flow, is the lapse in time between when you do the work or you sell the product and you're getting paid. And that's what mucks up many cash flows. So if you can actually try and bring those two together, I know with some businesses I've worked with, they would normally have got paid on the 20th of the month following, because that's always the way it was. And I said, well, no, it shouldn't be that way. Put on your invoice you want to be paid in 7 days and see what happens. I mean, and then some businesses will get back and say we only pay on the 20th. Well, that's fine. But then there were a lot of businesses that were only paying on the 20th of the month following, because that's what the person's invoice said. So it's having some bravado around that, and being a bit bolshy with getting people to pay for what they need to be paying for. So with profitability, there's a lot of learning involved in that, and there's quite a bit to it. But I just wanted to really touch on it, because some of the things in relation to profitability are actually quite simple and can be covered in, I'll try and do it in 5 or 6 minutes. So with profitability, there are really only 4 things that you've got control of for your profitability. A lot of the other things are outside your control, but there are 4 things that you do have control over. One of them is your pricing. Whole other workshop on pricing. But one of them is your pricing. The other one is how much you sell, so the quantity of what you sell. The third one is the cost of producing that goods or service. And the fourth one is the cost of your overheads. So that's the 4 things. And if you just go to the next slide, Alana.
Yes.
So these are the 4 levers that you've got to pull. And so the things that you need to do to be more profitable is to put your prices up. It's one of your options. Second option, sell more. Third option, bring the cost down of the cost of your product. And the fourth one is bringing your overheads down. So there are 2 things that you've got to push up, and there are 2 things you've got that you want to bring down, pull down, push down. But the problem is that if you move the lever wrong, you can get something happening in an area that you don't want to happen. And the most obvious one with that is that you sometimes can have it, whereas you push the lever of putting your price up, but unfortunately your sales drop. So you've got a lever going down in the other direction. And if your sales drop more than what you're putting your prices up, you're going to actually lose your profitability. So that's when you have to really be careful with your levers. But if you do get it right, small changes in those 4 things, and especially if you've got the 4 of them moving in the right direction, makes a big difference to your profitability. And so what I've got there as an example is if you can put your prices up by 5%. Now 5% is not a lot, and it is often something that people would not even notice. So if you can put your prices up 5%, if you can get 5% more in sales, meanwhile you can bring your cost of producing that product down by 5%. Once again, 5%. It's not that much. So it's just making some, more considered moves with where you're buying materials from, etc. Make a 5% drop in the cost of producing that product, and then reducing your overheads by 5%, you actually get 120% increase in your profits. And to me, that's like amazing.
Who would like 120% increase in their profits in the next few months? And all of a sudden, this really big, scary thing became quite easy because you've just broken it up.
Yeah.
Into incremental shifts across those 4 pillars.
Into small shifts. And we're talking about, and that might be in 5% over the year. But if you break it down month by month as to what you have to do in that month, then the changes can be absolutely amazing. But without a cash flow forecasting tool like we've just shown you, it's really hard to see what you're doing and what levers you're pulling. And the other thing is just to be mindful of is that one of the greatest things that makes profitability very difficult is when you're not seeing where you are leaking profit. So if you're not keeping an eye on your outgoings and where you're losing money from your business, or people not being effective or productive, or a whole lot of things that might be going on that's causing you to leak profits. And when you're small, you don't notice it so much, but then as you grow, that leakage becomes a bloody waterfall. And before you know it, you're losing a lot of money, and that's what you don't want. The one thing I didn't go through, but if any of you are going onto that cash flow forecast and you're looking at it, is there is a line on the first revenue projections tab that you can put what the actual is, what actually happens. All right, so you've predicted that you're going to earn $10,000 of revenue, but unfortunately only 8,000 comes in. There's a row that you can put that difference, so it'll make all the adjustments for you. So that means that then shows you either where you're going really right, because you may have predicted 10,000 but 15,000 came in, so you put that $5,000 positive in and you go, man, I'm smashing it. Not only will I do a happy dance, but I will also go through my cash flow forecast and lift my forecast a little bit, because obviously I am doing better than what I expected. So it's called adjustment to actual, and it's up in that first box. So that's a really good one to change. Now, when I'm doing this review with businesses, I will change that revenue, and the reason I like to leave the old figure there so I don't overwrite it is it's really good for the business owner to be seeing if they did better than expected or worse than expected. But in the profit and loss, I will also go through and adjust what we were expecting to spend on something. In that case, I just overwrite it. So if I thought we were going to do spend $2,000 in materials, but we actually spent $3,000, I just override it. And if it's something really remarkable, I'll just highlight or so that I can see what's happening with the business.